Rain poured from the heavens, drenching him instantly, as if the sky itself was mourning his loss. Chris trudged through the deserted streets, his steps splashing in the puddles below, the tears streaming down his face blurred with the relentless rain. In one night, he had lost everything, his home, his family, and the sense of security he once knew. But what Chris didn't realize was that this moment, filled with rejection and despair, would lead to something extraordinary. This is a story of courage, resilience, and the transformative power of truth. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if you had to fight for your identity? Stay tuned as we delve into Chris's incredible journey, a journey that will change not just his life, but an entire community. The clinking of forks against plates was the only sound at the dinner table. Chris glanced between his parents, Richard and Linda, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment he had dreaded, the moment he had rehearsed 1,000 times in his mind. He drew a shaky breath and spoke. "Dad, Mom, I need to tell you something." His voice trembled, yet he forced the words out. "I'm gay." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, deafening in their impact. Richard froze, his fork suspended midair. Linda's eyes widened, her expression unreadable. Silence enveloped the room, but only for a moment. Then Richard erupted. "You've ruined this family's name," he roared, slamming his fist on the table. "How dare you shame us like this? Do you have any idea what people will say?" Chris tried to defend himself, his voice shaking. "Dad, I didn't choose this. I'm just trying to be honest." But Richard's anger only grew. "Honesty? This is disgusting. You're no son of mine. Get out of my house now." Chris turned to his mother, desperate for support, but Linda avoided his gaze, her voice barely audible. "Chris, maybe it's better if you leave for a while. Your father needs time." Richard's voice cut through her hesitation like a blade. "Time? He's not coming back. He's no longer my son." Build on despair, then shift to a glimmer of hope. The rain poured harder as Chris stepped into the night, his backpack clutched tightly. Each step felt heavier than the last. The storm around him mirrored the turmoil within. He wandered aimlessly until exhaustion overtook him, collapsing onto a park bench. As the cold seeped into his bones, Chris whispered to himself, "I'll prove them wrong. I'll survive." Little did he know, this journey would take him to places he never imagined, testing him in ways that would not only reshape his life, but ripple across the entire town. This is just the beginning of Chris's story. Join us next time as we follow his journey of resilience and discovery. Don't miss it. Like, share, and subscribe to stay connected. Chris found solace in the routine of cleaning tables and occasionally helping mix ingredients at Eleanor's bakery. It gave him a sense of purpose, even though the work was simple. Eleanor never pried into his past, offering quiet support that made Chris feel like he belonged, if only for a little while. But the small town wasn't as welcoming. Word quickly spread that Eleanor had taken in a runaway. Customers whispered behind her back, and some even refused to step foot in the bakery. One day, as Chris was cleaning the front counter, a tall and imposing man stormed in, his expression filled with disdain. "Eleanor," he barked, pointing at Chris, "do you even know who you're sheltering? That boy's trouble. People are talking, and it's not good for business." Eleanor straightened her back, her gaze steady. "If you have a problem with him, then take your business elsewhere." The man's face turned red. "You'll regret this," he hissed before storming out. Chris kept his head down, guilt gnawing at him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause problems for you." Eleanor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't you dare apologize," she said firmly. "You're not the problem. They are." Despite Eleanor's unwavering support, the pressure from the town grew. Chris felt the judgmental stares whenever he stepped outside. One evening, as he took out the trash, a group of teenagers confronted him. "Wow, look who's playing house now," one sneered. "Think hiding in that bakery makes you one of us?" Chris tried to ignore them, but they blocked his path. "I just want to be left alone," he said, his voice shaking. Too bad, another boy said, shoving him hard. Chris stumbled but didn't fall. Before they could do more, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her voice sharp as a knife. Enough, she shouted, marching toward them. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police. The boys hesitated before retreating, one muttering, "This isn't over." That night, as Chris lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," he whispered. Eleanor overheard his words and stepped into the room. "You're stronger than you think, Chris. Don't turn back now." Chris looked up at her, tears in his eyes. "Why do you believe in me?" "Because Eleanor said, her voice unwavering. "I've seen what happens when the world crushes someone's spirit, and I refuse to let that happen to you." For the first time in a long while, Chris allowed himself to hope that things might get better. But deep down, he knew the battle was far from over. Days turned into weeks, and Chris slowly settled into a routine at the bakery. The work provided stability, but the whispers and judgmental stares from the townsfolk never ceased. Every time he stepped outside, he felt their eyes on him, silently reminding him that he didn't belong. Yet within the warmth of Eleanor's kitchen, he felt a rare sense of safety. One rainy afternoon, as Chris was cleaning the bakery's storage room, he stumbled upon an old wooden box covered in dust. Its hinges creaked as he opened it. Inside, he found a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. Curiosity piqued, he untied the ribbon and began to read. The letters were heartfelt and filled with longing, telling the story of a man named Daniel who had been deeply in love with someone referred to as R. The emotions were raw and vulnerable, but what struck Chris was the repeated mention of shame and secrecy. As he read on, a chill ran down his spine. The R in the letters wasn't just anyone. It was his father, Richard. Chris's hands trembled as he held the letters. His father, the man who had thrown him out for being gay, had once been in a same-sex relationship himself. The hypocrisy was staggering, but beneath his anger, Chris felt a pang of sorrow. Had his father buried his true self out of fear? Was his rejection of Chris rooted in unresolved pain? That evening, Chris approached Eleanor with the letters in hand. "These were in the storage room," he said hesitantly. "Why do you have them?" Eleanor's expression softened. "They belonged to Daniel," she explained. "He was a close friend of mine, like a son. He loved your father deeply, but Richard ended their relationship when his family's pressure became too much." Chris's chest tightened. "Did my father ever care about him?" Eleanor nodded, her eyes misty. "He did, but fear is a powerful thing. Richard married your mother shortly after breaking things off with Daniel. Daniel never recovered. He moved away, and the last I heard, he passed away alone." The revelation left Chris torn between anger and empathy. His father's rejection suddenly seemed more complex and tragic. Meanwhile, Linda, Chris's mother, grappled with her own ghosts. Since Chris had left, guilt consumed her. One evening, as she rummaged through old keepsakes, she came across a letter she hadn't read in years. It was from her older brother, Michael, who had also been gay and cast out by their family decades ago. The letter, written from a hospital bed, was a final plea for reconciliation. "Linda, I don't blame you for staying silent," Michael wrote, "but silence can be as sharp as any word spoken. I hope one day you'll understand how much it hurt to be abandoned." Tears streamed down Linda's face as she read the words. The weight of her brother's rejection, and now her son's, was unbearable. She had been silent then, and she had been silent when Richard cast Chris out. But this time, her silence felt unforgivable. Back at the bakery, a new challenge arose. One morning, Eleanor found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a typed note, the words cold and threatening. "Stop sheltering that boy. He's a disgrace to this town, and you'll regret keeping him here." Eleanor's face hardened as she handed the note to Chris. "Looks like they've decided to escalate," she said. "But don't worry. I've dealt with cowards like this before." Chris tried to brush it off, but deep down he was terrified. The hostility in the town was growing, and he knew it was only a matter of time before something worse happened. His fears were realized one night when he and Eleanor returned to the bakery to find the windows shattered and graffiti scrawled across the walls. Chris's eyes widened as he stepped into the bakery, only to find hate scrawled across the walls in angry red letters. Words like freak and get out dripped with venom. His stomach churned as he whispered, his voice cracking, "This is my fault. I shouldn't have come here." Eleanor placed a firm hand on his shoulder, her voice sharp with defiance. "Don't you dare blame yourself. This is on them, not you, and we're not letting them scare us." The very next day, Eleanor hired a local handyman to repair the damage. She refused to close the bakery despite the growing risks. "If we back down now, they win," she said with unwavering resolve. Yet Chris couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at him, a dark cloud shadowing his every move. The situation escalated when the man behind the threats revealed himself during a tense town hall meeting. It was one of the teenagers who had attacked Chris in the park, now an adult and a member of the town council. Chris's fists clenched as the man spread his message of division and fear. Finally, Chris found his voice. "You talk about morals," he said, his voice trembling but steady. "But where's the morality in hate? Where's the morality in throwing a kid out onto the streets because of who they are?" His words hung heavy in the air, daring everyone in the room to examine their own prejudices. For the first time, Chris felt a spark of determination that eclipsed his fear. Weeks passed and the threats grew more brazen. Notes with venomous messages slipped under the bakery door, and one night a rock smashed through the window. Attached was a chilling note. "Leave town, freak." Chris's hands trembled as he read it. Eleanor, already sweeping up the broken glass, turned to him with steely resolve. "Bullies thrive on fear," she said. "The moment you give in, they win. And I'm not about to let that happen." Her words emboldened him, but the weight of constant harassment wore him down. Then one afternoon, Mason Thompson, a polished businessman and council member, walked into the bakery. His charm couldn't mask the menace in his eyes. "You've stirred up quite the controversy," Mason said, leaning on the counter. Eleanor's expression darkened. "What do you want, Mason?" "Tradition matters to this town," he replied smoothly. "Your choices are causing quite a stir. Is this really worth your business and legacy?" Chris couldn't stay silent. "Why does it matter to you?" he demanded. "Why are you so afraid of someone like me?" For a fleeting moment, shame flickered across Mason's face, but he quickly masked it and left. Later that night, Eleanor shared her own pain, connecting Chris's fight with her late brother's struggles. "This time," she vowed, "I won't make the same mistake." The turning point came during another town hall meeting. This time, Chris addressed the council directly. "I've been called a disgrace, an abomination," he said, "but what's truly disgraceful is the hate and fear tearing this town apart. I didn't choose to be who I am, but you have a choice, to be better." The crowd's silence was broken by his mother, Linda, stepping forward. "I've stayed silent for too long," she said, her voice cracking. "I lost my brother because of fear, and I almost lost my son. Not anymore." Her words rippled through the room. Even Mason seemed shaken, retreating into silence. But outside, tensions boiled over as protesters surged toward the stage. Allies formed a protective barrier, Eleanor at the forefront. "You'll have to go through us first," she declared. Finally, Mason stepped forward, his voice heavy. "Enough. This isn't the way." The grand opening of the LGBTQ+ Center was a beacon of hope. Chris addressed the crowd, his voice resolute. "This fight isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever felt they didn't belong. Change starts here, with all of us." The crowd's cheer was a roar of solidarity, echoing through the town. For the first time, Chris felt the weight of his past lifting, replaced by hope and purpose. As the weeks turned into months, Chris began mending relationships with his parents. Linda became a vocal advocate, volunteering at the center, while Richard made efforts to reconnect. The bakery and the center stood as symbols of resilience and love, drawing people from all walks of life. One evening, Eleanor and Chris sat outside the bakery watching the stars. "You changed this town," she said, pride in her voice. Chris smiled. "I didn't do it alone, and we're just getting started." Chris's story is a testament to the power of courage, love, and forgiveness. It reminds us that change isn't easy, but it's worth it. If his journey inspired you, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button for more empowering stories. We'd love to hear from you. Share a moment when you chose courage over fear in the comments below. Let's inspire each other to make a difference, one story at a time.